Hello and welcome to today's lecture on integumentary system. In today's video, we will be covering integument, structure and functions. Integument, as we know, is the external covering of the body. It provides protection. It is the first line of defense against environmental stresses. It helps an organism to sense the environment. It helps to regulate the body temperature and many more. We will be covering the functions of the skin or integument at the last of the video. Skin or integument is basically consisting of two layers, that is epidermis and dermis. Epidermis is the superficial or the outermost layer and dermis lies below this epidermis. It forms the largest organ of the body in terms of weight. It its thickness varies from half millimeter to about 4 millimeter. Hypodermis lies below dermis and it is mistakenly sometimes taken to be the part of the skin, but hypodermis is not the part of the skin. In the second slide, you can see the detailed TS of the epidermis or the skin. It shows the dermis and epidermis here. Here you can see. Epidermis is basically consists of four different types of cells. That is keratinocytes, melanocytes, intraepidermal macrophages, and tactile epithelial cells. Keratinocytes are the most numerous cells. They compose 90% of the epidermis. They are called keratinocytes because of the presence of the keratin protein, which is tough, fibrous, and protective in nature. Keratinocytes are also responsible for the production of lamellar granules, which secrete hydrophobic secretions, and these ensure the water repellent properties of the different layers of epidermis. Melanocytes produce melanin pigment. Melanin pigment gives the skin its color, and it also ensures the protection from UV light. Intraepidermal macrophages, they are responsible for the immune response of the skin. And the tactile epithelial cells, they form the tactile discs. They are located in the deepest layer of the epidermis, and they give the sense of touch to the skin, and they are least in terms of number in all four different types of cells. Now here in this slide you can see different layers of the epidermis. The epidermis is basically consists of five different layers, that is stratum basal, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, stratum lucidum, and stratum corneum. Stratum corneum is the topmost layer, it is the outermost layer of the epidermis. Stratum basal is the deepest layer. It is a single cell thick layer consisting of cuboidal columnar epithelial cells. It is characterized by the presence of stem cells. The tactile discs, the epithelial cells forming tactile discs, they are also located in this layer. And this stratum basal is the mother of all different layers of the epidermis. That is, it gives rise to the cells of all different layers of epidermis. In case of heavy damage or large injury to the skin grafting is done because the large injury leads to the loss of stratum basal, and in the absence of stratum basal the skin can't restore its last layers because it's the mother of all different layers of the epidermis. So the skin grafting is done. The different layers of the skin are taken from some other part of the body of the same person or the different person after proper checking, and then these tissues are placed over the damaged part so as to ensure the protection of the tissues or the cells below. Second layer is stratum spinosum. It is consisting of 8 to 10 different layers of keratinocytes. The cells in stratum spinosum still can divide, That is, the cells of the stratum basale and stratum spinosum divides. It is called spinosum because when the cells are taken from this stratum spinosum for examination or under microscopy, they produce spine-like structures on the basis of which it is called stratum spinosum. The layer also contains intraepidermal macrophages, which ensures the immune response of the skin. Now the third layer is stratum granulosum. Stratum granulosum is 3 to 5 layer cell thick flattened keratinocytes. One important feature of this layer is that the cells here undergo apoptosis. That is, the keratinocytes here start dying now. It is because the supplies of nutrients and oxygen are limited to only first two layers only. They can't reach third layer. So the cells in this stratum granulosum start apoptosis, they start natural death. The cells here show the granules of a protein called keratohyalin. On the basis of these dark staining granules, these are called granulocytes. The keratohyalin protein is responsible for the changing of keratin intermediate filaments into keratin. Keratin, already told, is responsible for the protective function of the skin. It means all the cells above this stratum granulosum will be consisting of keratin protein. And this keratin protein has been found from keratin intermediate filaments because of the keratohyalin, and keratohyalin is contained inside the granules of this stratum granulosum. Another important feature of the cells here in this layer is that they contain lamellar granules as well. These lamellar granules release lipid-rich secretions and they are water repellent. The water repellent characteristic of the skin or the integument is because of the lamellar granules secreted in stratum granulosum. The next layer is stratum lucidum. The stratum lucidum is present only in thick skin areas of the body, that is palm, sole, fingertip, etc. It is not present throughout. It is consisting of 4 to 6 layers of dead keratinocytes, and it provides additional level of toughness and protection in these areas because these are the areas of the skin which are continuously exposed to the different environmental stresses or environmental agents. So additional level of protection is required in these areas, and this is ensured by this stratum lucidum. Now is the outermost layer, that is stratum corneum. It consists of on an average 25 to 30 different layers of keratinocytes. The cells here in this layer are totally dead and they are packed with keratin only. In some thick areas of the skin, there can be more than 50 layers of different keratinocytes as well. The cells in this layer are closely packed together, and the cells here are continuously lost or they are slowed off because of the environmental stresses or the friction to the external agents, and the loss of the cells in this layer is continuously restored from the cells of the layers below. One important thing is that the hard working hands, they are tough and they are rough to touch. It is because of the abnormal thickening of stratum corneum called callus. When this stratum corneum is continuously exposed to some hard structures, additional layers of the stratum keratinocytes is secreted and this forms the structures called callus. So these were the different layers of the skin, and the cells of this epidermis, they start their journey from stratum basale. From stratum basale they come to stratum spinosum, from here to stratum granulosum where they undergo apoptosis, and then they shift to stratum lucidum, and from stratum lucidum to finally stratum corneum. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks for a cell to reach from stratum basale to stratum corneum normally. But if these keratinocytes move more quickly than normal, and if they are shed 7 to 10 days before the normal time of shedding. It is the condition of the disease, it is called psoriasis, in which the cells of the stratum corneum are shed prematurely. Like the cells of the epidermis, they start journey from the stratum basil up to stratum corneum. Similarly, this keratin protein also starts its journey from stratum basil to stratum corneum. In stratum basil cells, it is in the form of the intermediate filaments. Then in stratum spinosum, it forms coarse bundles of keratin. And then in stratum granulosum, the intermediate filaments are turned into keratin protein in the presence of keratohyalin. And then the cell layers above this stratum granulosum, they are dead keratinocytes consisting of keratin protein only. And the corneum external most layer, this is the cells there are loaded with keratin protein only. This was epidermis. Now below epidermis, another layer of the integumented skin is dermis. Dermis is responsible for the extensibility, elasticity, stretch, and recoil properties of the skin. It is basically consisting of the collagen and other elastic fibers. The cells here are few, that is just like fibroblasts, macrophages, etc. There can be some adipocytes as well, and it is mostly consisting of the blood vessels, nose, and certain glands and the hair follicles. That is the nerve or blood supplies of the skin are found in this dermis. It is divided basically into two regions, that is outer papillary region and the below reticular region. It is called papillary region because of the presence of papillae, dermal papillae. These are actually small nipple shaped structures, and these project deep into the undersurface of the epidermis. That is, they project towards the epidermis, increasing the surface area of the dermis as well as ensuring the supplies of nutrients and oxygen to the deep layers of epidermis. Also, the nerve endings ensuring the touch reception are they are also being facilitated by these papillae. It consists of thin collagen and fine elastic fibers. The reticular region below, which is attached with the subcutaneous layer or the hypodermis below, it contains bundles of thick collagen fibers. There are some scattered fibroblasts, there can be some wandering macrophages as well. Some adipocyte cells can also be found in the deepest part of this reticular region. The collagen fibers in this region form a net-like arrangement that is responsible for the extensibility and elasticity of the skin. Blood vessels, nerves, hair follicles, the other glands, they occupy the space between these different fibers. This was all about dermis, which is consisting of mostly fibers and lesser cells. Now we will move towards the functions of the integument or functions of the skin. One of the important and foremost function of this integument is protection. The skin provides the first line of defense against the environmental stresses. It protects the underlying tissue from microbes, abrasion, heat, and chemicals. The tightly locked keratinocytes, they resist invasion by microbes. The lipid-rich secretions ensure uh, hydrophobic properties of the skin. The oily sebum of sebaceous glands present there, they contain bactericidal chemicals. Melanin is there to shield against the UV component of the sunlight. Similarly, intraepidermal macrophages are there to alert the immune system. All these are different ways how the skin ensures the protection. Another important function of the skin is thermoregulation. It contributes to thermoregulation in two different ways. One is by liberating sweat, and another is adjusting the flow of blood in the dermis. By liberating sweat, how it controls thermoregulation or how it ensures thermoregulation? Because we all know Water has the capacity to store heat and to contain heat up to longer times. When the sweat comes out on the surface, it has heat in it as well, and evaporation of the sweat from the surface means loss of heat. Similarly, in summers, the blood keeps on the peripheral areas of the body, that is in skin, and from where most of the heat is lost. And in winters or in cold temperature, this blood remains mostly towards the center of the body, and it is lesser in the peripheral areas, that is, less heat is lost. In this way, the thermoregulation function of the body is ensured by the skin. It also acts as a blood reservoir because 8 to 10% of the blood at a time is present in the blood vessels, and the extensive network of blood vessels inside the dermis. Important function, that is another one, it is cutaneous sensation. In a human being or an organism, it directly senses the environment because of the skin, and there are tactile receptors, there is temperature sensation, there is pan sensation. All these different senses are ensured by the presence of different sensory receptors in the skin, and this is the way how this cutaneous sensation is ensured. These different neural endings and different receptors, they are responsible for this. Excretion and absorption is also one of the functions of the skin. Excretion of the sweat not only ensures the loss of the heat, but the salts and carbon dioxide component, or the ammonia or urea component of the body is also lost to some extent through this sweat. Lipid-rich secretions of the lamellar granules protects dehydration. That is, it provides the waterproof layer to ensure that less water is lost from the body. Also, it disallows the entry of the water from outside. The fat soluble ointments or vitamins, if they are applied on the surface, they can be absorbed into the skin because lipid rich secretions are there, and this is one of the basis for certain treatments, and that is the application of ointments on the surface of the skin. This ensures the treatment in some way, and this is this hydrophobic nature of the skin because of this. Another and the last function of the skin is the synthesis of vitamin D. Vitamin D synthesis requires activation of precursor molecule by small amount of UV light. Enzymes in the liver and kidney then modify activated molecule, finally producing active calcitriol. Little exposure of 10 to 15 minutes twice a week is sufficient for the synthesis of vitamin D. This was all in the structure of the integument and its functions. Thank you.
P H A N K Y O U P. Thank you. Jazakallah.